Good morning. This is Carrie with Special Needs Guidance Group, and today I'm going to ask Scarlett about the 4 other categories we haven't yet covered that are developmental disabilities that can make someone eligible to be on the Florida Medwaiver waitlist. Scarlett, those are Prader-Willi, Down syndrome, Phelan-McDermid, and spina bifida. So could you tell a little bit more about each of those categories?
Sure. Let's start with spina bifida because it's not technically, as we discussed, it's not technically a genetic disorder. It's when there's been some sort of damage to the spinal column and spinal fluid has leaked. And that can be very minimal, or it can lead to full paralysis and everything else. But it is a check the box. So the thing that all 4 of these have in common is that they all require medical testing and medical diagnostics, and that is the information that would be sent to APD. Spina bifida, like we just said, is not a genetic condition or disorder. However, it does require the medical diagnosis. The other 3, so Phelan-McDermid Down syndrome and Prader-Willi, I've heard it pronounced many ways. Those 3 are all genetic disorders or conditions. So you would send in not only the medical diagnosis of it, but also the genetic testing. And again, all 4 of those categories are simple check the boxes. If you have this, no matter how it really impacts your life, it's an automatic get on the wait list. You're determined eligible with that proper medical diagnosis and genetic testing.
Okay. And then as far as Phelan-McDermid, you told me something I found very surprising about that syndrome. Do you want to mention that?
Yes, I do. And a little background. So most of you know I was a support coordinator for years. And I remember when I was still a support coordinator when they added Phelan-McDermid to the list. And it was a big deal. I had been involved in support coordination for 10 or 15 years at that point, and there had been no changes to eligibility, who was eligible, who was not. And when they added that new category, it was a really big deal. It was announced, and something they didn't announce at that time, because I remember the announcement, that I learned just 2 years ago through my own digging and research for a family. I was messing around on the APD website, and Phelan-McDermid is an automatic get on the wait list and waiver. So you don't, it's not pass, go, collect $200. You're automatically on the waiver. So if anyone's watching this and your child is on the wait list because they have Phelan-McDermid, you need to contact your APD office immediately and let them know that your child should be placed on the waiver. I don't know if it was an oversight or if when they added the category to the list, maybe the funding wasn't quite there and it wasn't an automatic go from application to waiver. If that changed over time and maybe that announcement was kind of missed, but there are APD staff who haven't been fully aware of that. And so I've had to send them the notice from the APD website saying, no, you need to put this person on the waiver.
Wow.
So that one's a really big deal. It's much more rare than the others. And there was a lump sum of funding donated to fund the people with Phelan-McDermid for their waiver services.
Okay, because that was my question. I was like, why is this one category automatically funded? So kind of an aside, do private donors give money to the waiver?
So not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I think, so there wasn't a ton of information. I've heard back and forth from other people, and I'm sure there are people who know the specific detailed answers, but to my understanding, a senator's child had Phelan-McDermid, and they lobbied for and raised the funding for that. If anyone knows the exact answer, again, this is just what I've been told. It's more hearsay than anything, but I've been told by APD staff and other people that is the circumstances that surround, the funding for that. If anyone knows the exact answer, we would love to hear it, or if you could send it to us in writing. But it is a really big deal. I know of 2 families. I mean, and I've been doing this for a long time. I only know of 2 families whose child has Phelan-McDermid. And one was, they had been on the waiting list for several years.
Wow.
And reached out to me, and that's the family I was doing the digging, and was like, oh my gosh, we don't have to do the crisis process, guys. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that was a nice day.
Yeah.
To get to call and tell a family that, hey, you don't have to go through crisis, you should be on the waiver.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you. And then I did have one more question. There was a mom that asked us about spina bifida, and I believe her son or daughter had a type that didn't lead to developmental disabilities. I don't know if you recall this, but so having spina bifida doesn't necessarily meet an automatic on the wait list, right?
To my understanding, it does. In fact, I have the statute printed out right here, and it says, for purposes of agency eligibility, spina bifida refers to a confirmed diagnosis of spina bifida cystica or myelomeningococele. I massacred that, and I apologize. And again, I had an instance years ago. This has been probably 11, 12 years ago. I was working with a family who the granddaughter was on the waiver, and her mother had a stroke or something. The grandparents were caregivers. Her mother had a stroke, and the grandparents were suddenly taking care of mother and grandmother. The grandmother, in conversation, mentioned to me, we were, and the mother's stroke had happened when she was in her 30s. So I didn't have any hope of trying to get them on waiver. And in a random conversation, she mentioned that when mom was very young, she had been diagnosed with spina bifida, but it was very mild and it never caused any issues or developmental delays or disabilities. But it had been diagnosed at an early age. And I was like, oh, whoa, wait a second. She's like, well, but that's not what's causing the problems now. And I said, that still might be worthwhile. And she requires total care at this point. So they were able to apply. Her daughter was in her 30s. They were able to apply and find those old medical records that showed she had been diagnosed with spina bifida at an early age, and it didn't require anything else. So per the statute, the way the statute reads, no, I don't think it has to have caused, it just had to have been diagnosed or noted medically during their formative years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything you want to add about these 4 different diagnoses? I
don't think so. They're kind of the easy ones.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks.